All right, welcome back to Bracy Sports Media. My name is Aaron Bracy, and I'm happy to be joined today by Matthew Osborne, former colleague of mine who currently works for the Northeast Georgian paper somewhere in the South. Who knows where that is, Matthew? But Matthew, thank you for joining Bracy Sports Media today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I miss the old days of being up in the Northeast there.
So Matthew and I met at back in my newspaper days in Trenton, and we had some great times, some interesting times. But one of the things I always enjoyed about working with you is you always put a smile on my face. So what do you remember about those days back in Trenton? And you were there a lot longer than I was.
Yeah, it was something. We had some fun though. We had the characters is what I remember.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them passed on too. George O'Gorman passed away, which was really sad. Loved George. Jack Kennard passed away. Really great guy. It was Paul Mickle's a character. He's still around, but he's not at the Trentonian, but he's a character. And
how many stories a day would
we recently
George
did
write?
our own bracket. We did Nickel Madden. Pardon me?
How many stories a day would George write?
Oh, ridiculous. He was doing a schedule that no one could do. I mean, even I was half his age, and he's covering the Giants, the girls' soccer, everything all in 1 week. And I don't know how well, one way he did it was, as you know, he would pound his stories out, and typos didn't matter to him whatsoever. It was just, I'm just going to get this downloaded from my brain, and then you guys figure it out from there.
Yet again, there was might not be anyone that I've ever met that cared as much about local youth sports as George. Just wanted to make sure every kid's name would get in the paper, every sport would get covered, and wanted about 40 inches per story to do it.
And he knew all that information. You could just ask him. He didn't have to look it up. He knew it all. I mean, you could ask him, who was the kid from 1986 from Hamilton High and doing whatever, and he would know the answer. He just knew it.
Yeah, George was a great guy. Rest in peace. Matthew Osborne from the Northeast Georgian newspaper. Where is that, Matthew, by the way?
It's in Cornelia, Georgia. It's a nice town. It's a nice area. We're getting ready to move there. I'm still stuck in North Carolina. It's kind of a complicated situation, but we're gonna be moving there in the next couple months. So,
but you can see by his dress there with the HK Phillies jersey on. Matthew is a Philadelphia sports fan. His dad is a Delaware County native and was an outstanding athlete growing up. Can you talk about, Matthew, how you got your love of Philadelphia sports? Because you didn't grow up in the area. You grew up in Florida.
Yeah, we were moved around a lot, but we were mostly in Florida. But my dad is a Delco Hall of Famer, as you mentioned, and he's always been he's never wavered. As bad as some of these Philly teams have been, he's 70 years old, and he stuck with them all the way. And yeah, it was really I really got into the Phillies at spring training because we had season tickets there.
Okay.
And then the Flyers we'd watch on TV in the 80s when the Flyers were on TV with Tim Kerr and guys like that. Before we had the Lightning down there in Tampa, it was a lot of fun. And the Eagles, we loved the Eagles. I remember my dad was on a cruise during the Fog Bowl, and all he had was a little earpiece. They didn't have internet back then. His little earpiece and a little radio, and he's trying to listen to the game, and they're talking about how foggy it is. And he was pissed off when he came home that they lost, and he's like, it couldn't have been that foggy. I'm like, no, it was pretty foggy, actually. It was pretty bad.
I remember watching that game. I think I was 12 or 13 years old and just saying, they got to stop the game. They can't let them play with this fog. But they kept playing.
They should have stopped it.
That was a crushing blow to my childhood. Matthew, let's talk about the current state of the Philadelphia teams as you try and quiet your kids over there.
That's right. It is a struggle.
I know how that can be. There's a sign on my door that says, Daddy's doing an interview. Shush, please.
I should have made one of those. Yeah.
So obviously with sports stopping, that was a really tough time for the Flyers. They had been so hot going into the stoppage. They had won 9 straight and then lost the last game prior to the stoppage to Boston. What did you see out of this Flyers team this year that was making them so successful?
Well, it's interesting because we've been talking for years about trust in the process with the Sixers. And really it was the Flyers that were quietly doing a process, because they've finally built a young team that is going to be together for a while, that was really just hitting its stride. And think about the fact that they didn't have Nolan Patrick all year, and Oscar Lindblom has cancer, and we didn't have him for very long. I mean, their team, if it gets all back together, could be very strong for a couple of years. And I know we've said for 40-some years, this is it, we're doing it. But we finally got a young team that I think is ready to do something.
I mean, they were a point out of first place prior to the stoppage and really looked like a team that was gelling and could really do well together. What did you see as their true potential this year prior to the virus? And if things do get back together, do you think they could gel quickly and make a run like perhaps they were looking like?
Well, again, they're young, so the Flyers, if you know, had some older teams over the years that were good veterans, but they were kind of at the end of the line. I think this team is just on the rise, and I like the way they were moving, the way they were passing. I really think that with the coach they have now, I really think their system is starting to click in. And like I said, they really haven't had their full strength, and JR's been hurt, and he's hurt right now, but maybe he could be back if they get this thing back. We don't even know what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's actually one nice thing is they'll get a healthy JVR possibly, and Phil Myers, who broke his kneecap, I think, a couple games prior to the break. So
that's right.
In that respect, it could help them if hockey comes back. Let's take a look at the Sixers, because they've been tale of two teams. Home record is 29-2, and the road record is 10-24. Any Osborne reasoning for all that?
Well, the Sixers are, and my dad says this all the time too, the Sixers are tough to watch, because they're better than they show on the road. They're better than that. And they just can't put it together. They just go in these giant slumbers where they can't score. And you're wondering, is this the same dudes that played last week? Like, you just don't even know. But they have all the talent to do it. And it's just so frustrating to watch. So
word is they have been practicing yoga during this quarantine. So how much is yoga going to help them?
I don't know. It can't hurt. I think it can hurt anyway. But like I said, they've got all the talent in the world. They just got to put it together. And I think the Sixers, and then it's amazing how people were patient while they were winning 10 games a year, and now they're impatient. So we can't decide what we want to do with the Sixers.
Matthew Osborne, editor of the Northeast Georgian newspaper and a former colleague of mine in Trenton, is joining us today on Bracy Sports Media. Matthew, you have to watch the Philadelphia teams from afar. You don't get to cover them like you did when you were in Trenton, but you do get to cover some pretty cool stuff, including Terrell Owens' Hall of Fame ceremony, which involved just his own company.
It was
about that.
Well, yeah, we went over to Chattanooga. It's only an hour and 15 minutes from here. And I thought, man, this would be cool. We get to see Terrell Owens. And it was a pretty neat event, really. It was just him just kind of creating his own event. And it was cool when we got to talk to him afterwards, just sitting right in front of him. I think there's a lot of guys in sports that people think they know a guy because they see him on TV and they watch him play. But they don't really know somebody. And it's like, I know, and Terrell Owens is a lot of the same way. Terrell Owens is doing push-ups in his driveway in Moorestown and whatnot, but that's part of his show. But Terrell, the regular guy, just seems like a cool guy, nice guy. Like, he really seemed like a genuine guy, and I just enjoyed just sitting there and getting to meet with him for a while. It was fun.
So what kind of stuff was he saying after? because there was a lot of bitterness there. Did he display bitterness at that time, or what was he saying?
Well, I guess he was a little bitter. The whole event was created because he was a little bitter that he didn't get in earlier.
Right.
And I guess that has something to do with the media relationship with him. I actually asked him a question about Dawkins, because he said Dawkins reached out to him. And I asked him if he and Dawkins were tight. And he kind of gave me a meandering answer that didn't really answer the question. Like, he said a lot of nice things about the Eagles. He's like, I like my time there and blah, blah, blah. but he didn't really answer the question about whether he and Dawkins were tight. So I don't know. That kind of left me hanging. But I do think that he, even though some people don't like him, he is a genuine guy. Like, I feel like he's not going to lie to you, you know.
Matthew, another thing that you got to do there is, I guess, as a more of a fan than a reporter, you got to go to the second game of the Phillies season under first-year manager Gabe Kapler. How did that go?
Well, we got to see the new park in Atlanta. I don't know what it's called now. It was SunTrust Park. Now it's some Bank of the Week Park, whatever it is. We got to see game 2 the day after he pulled Nola after 5 innings and they lost. Then game 2, he runs out of pitchers in game 2 in March. And there was literally, I remember them being a poll question on one of the Philly newspapers that said, should we fire him after one weekend? And I was like, even for Philly, that seemed strong. But it was bizarre. I've never seen a guy use a pitcher for one pitch in March. Never seen that before. It was shocking.
Well, he's obviously going to be doing that out in San Francisco this year. Well, whether he's going to be not using his bullpen that way, but he's going to be in San Francisco this year. And Joe Girardi is going to be in Philadelphia, assuming we have baseball season, whenever baseball returns. What's your feeling on Joe Girardi and what impact he can have this season on the Phillies?
I think he's experienced winner, and I think people respect him for that. Like, he had a lot of great teams in New York, and he had a great career as a ball player, and I think working with pitchers as well. So I think a lot of guys will respect him. I think they're going to. I don't know. There's still a schism in baseball between the guys who believe in all the new wave stuff and the old school baseball people. And right now you're trying to blend those two. Girardi's a good blend of that, to where he can speak to both groups and they can both respect him. So I think they're going to improve. I think they'll be up in that 85-90 win range if they can ever play.
Matthew, one of the things that we do is we both share July birthdays. And
that's right.
You know, I have an affinity for Smithwick's beer, and you have an affinity for memorabilia. So I'm not a big memorabilia guy. I have a few things here and there, but I know you love memorabilia, and I always try and, when I can, grab you something and then send you a care package around your birthday in July. That care package is going to be looking a little light. I think I have I don't know, Jody Shelley Flyers poster lying around or something. I don't know if Jody Shelley ever played for the Flyers.
You have a Jody Shelley poster. You better save that. That might be worth something right there. But
talk about your memorabilia and what's your collection up to these days?
I probably got about 80, 90 bobbleheads or so, which is a real pain when you're going to pack. Like, we're moving in a couple months. I got to pack each one of them individually. So that's going to be fun. When you collect memorabilia, a lot of times you get the question of how much stuff is too much stuff, you know? For example, like, how many patches are too many? I've got World Series here, got HK, I've got Chase Utley's retirement patch on here.
Did that come like that, or did you have to put those on there, or did that come like that?
The HK came on here. I put these on. I put the World Series and the retirement one.
Oh, that's cool. Nice.
So it's now a full service Utley jersey, which I like about it.
So one of the things we used to always talk about when we worked together, at that time, the University of Florida was, you would remember, I guess 2007, they were definitely a top 5 team.
Yeah.
And Tim Tebow was quarterbacking them, and you had a lot of Tebow love. And yet suddenly I saw you tweeted out last week your top college football players, and it was like blasphemy because you chose Shane Matthews after all that Tebow love. How could you possibly do that?
You know, I did. Tebow was great. I mean, he was fantastic. And of course, that was, like I said, you and I were working together during that time when Tebow won the Heisman in 2007.
Right.
But Shane Matthews, you know, sometimes you got to go back to the guys who made you kind of fall in love with the sport. And when Shane was there, that's when Steve Spurrier really kind of invented Gator football as it stands today. And Shane was chucking it all over the place. And he was really the guy that kind of made me fall in love with Gator football for real. Like, I watched it in the 80s. 80s a little bit, but it was a lot more fun in the 90s. And it, you know, sometimes you just got to remember the guys that got you into it.
So what is going to be a bigger disappointment for you, potentially, not having Philadelphia sports return or not having University of Florida football this fall, and why?
Well, they'd both be terrible disasters. I'm hoping by fall. Boy, it feels like we've got to get this thing turned around by fall, or we're probably in bigger trouble than we realize. So you'd like to think you get something. I mean, it'd be nice if baseball could open July 4th weekend or something. That would be cool. Maybe they play a half season. I mean, that would be optimistic, but I hope so.
Well, you saw in Taiwan, they started playing with cutout fans or robotic fans. Would those fans be booing in Philadelphia?
As long as those robotic fans are able to tweet during every play of all Philadelphia sports games, then yeah, we can do that. I mean, they could probably build a Twitter algorithm from those robots that could basically say the same kind of ridiculous stuff, I think we can do it.
Matthew Osborne from the Northeast Georgian newspaper joining us here on Bracy Sports Media. Matthew, a couple more things I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned that it would be a disaster for sports not to return. Obviously, there are bigger things in sports right now. But, I mean, we love sports. It's been such a big part of our lives. People watching this, it's a huge part of their lives. What is your gut feeling whether or not sports returns and when it does return?
Well, I think, like I said, if you want my honest opinion, I think that NHL and NBA should probably punt. And baseball, like I said, should really shoot for July 4th, maybe, be the best case scenario. And I think football will make it, but they're just not going to have that preparation time for football. It's going to kind of be like fellas getting together on the weekend to play football, and only it's the NFL. I mean, they're not going to have all those camps and preseason. I think they're just going to be like, well, let's go. Let's do it. So that could lead to a weird Super Bowl year. Like we could have like, you know, Tampa Bay and Jacksonville in the Super Bowl or something like that. You know, it'd be crazy.
Matthew, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today on Bracy Sports Media.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. And if you're enjoying our videos, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and give us some comments in the comment section. Maybe you can talk to Matthew about Philadelphia sports because he loves following it from afar. Luckily, we can do that now on social media. But Matthew, I really appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully we have sports back really soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I miss it for sure. I just like, it's nice to be able to just talk about it a little bit. It's nice. But thanks for having me, Aaron.
Absolutely.